Hey, hello, everybody. It is great to see you. It is my pleasure to be back. Sorry we couldn't do it last week. Just too much going on for everybody. Hey, if I look a little burned, that's because I am. I got in some late season skiing here in Colorado, and it was pretty amazing up at Loveland Ski Resort. So that was
how close to the sun were you, brother?
I was a lot closer.
You must have had goggles on that protected you.
Yes, that's what's going on. So today we're talking about the question of, ready? Can we know the sequence of Jesus' return? Dun, dun, dun. That is our question for today. So we have a special guest with us. We have Doug Krieger, who is going to help us think about this as he's looking very pensive right now. So fantastic. Doug, we're so glad that you can join us. By the way, you're muted, just so you know that. But this will be, I think, a lot of fun. So where should we start, gentlemen? What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, well, of course.
By the way, I want to give a special shout out to Prophecy Watchers, who actually put up a video yesterday. I think the guy's name is Brainerd, Doug Brainerd, maybe. It seems like everybody's named Doug, except me and Scott. And it was a very good analysis of the new view, which is a very new view, that the apostasy in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3, 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3, is the rapture, is a physical departure, a spatial departure. And I don't know if it's a Dr. Brainerd or not, but he's written a book on it, and it was a very good analysis, and I thought it was very honest, and I was encouraged to see that, because as you know, that's one of those ones that's sort of an irritant to me, and Doug too. I mean, Doug, this is one of the reasons why
I'm very irritated over that analysis.
Well, yeah, and Doug,
I'm sideways.
And Doug,
apostasy is the rapture. Hello.
Yeah, it's not very good, and but I thought it was very nice and measured, and so you can go look at that at the Prophecy Watchers YouTube channel.
I'm actually planning on going to the conference in a couple of weeks. It's going to be here in Colorado Springs, so I thought.
Are you going?
Go say hello. I'm trying not to make waves.
Try to go skiing wear like a balaclava and go skiing with leave the top of your head.
Oh my goodness, you guys are too
just so
funny.
You can kind of even that out there.
There you go.
Oh my goodness.
All right. So the sequence of the return of Christ.
You can start with my map. That's always fun. I sent it to you, Doug, and to John.
Okay.
So this map is fairly old. I've done this map maybe about 15, 20 years ago. It's called the Three Prophetic Wars, and it has to do with the coming of Christ. And these three prophetic wars are part, I believe, of that scenario. And I take it from Isaiah 17 and Zechariah chapter 9, which oddly enough has the scenario of the oracle of Damascus connected with it, to become a ruinous heap. And then right after in Zechariah, there's the map, right after that verse in the oracle in Zechariah chapter 9, there are two verses. I think it's Zechariah 9 and 10, or 10 and 11. But in any event, the verses are all quoted in all four Gospels. Behold, your king is coming to you, meek and riding on a donkey, the colt, the foal of a donkey. And then it says that his kingdom will stretch from shore to shore, which I believe presents the first and second coming of the Messiah all in one package. And it's associated right after the oracle of Damascus. And, years ago, before the civil war in Syria, I had talked about Damascus becoming a ruinous heap, akin to what's happening in Ukraine. Oddly enough, by one of the same generals who seems to be dissipating the cities by bombardment and what have you.
The same strategy, yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, I had presented this thing about, 10 years ago. The Civil War's gone on about 8 years. So I knew that it was going to explode. And if it did, it would be the Oracle of Damascus. And they already have reached over 13 million refugees have fled from Syria and are in Jordan or in Europe or all over the Middle East right now. And many of them actually are here. So that has happened. And so I feel that this is where we are right now, and that the Messiah's coming is imminent due to the Oracle of Damascus. And,
Doug, do you think that the destruction of Damascus, it's prophesied, has occurred?
I think that we're wrapping up right now the finality of the Oracle of Damascus. The interesting thing, just as a sidebar, I got a call from somebody from Damascus, apparently a woman who was very concerned about my prophetical touch. And she said, would you please quit calling for the Damascus to be a ruinous heap? Because it's having an effect on a lot of people around here. And this is before it happened. I got a call from the Department of Defense wanting to know where I got this scenario. From Wisconsin, believe it or not. And it was legitimate. And I just said, well, I'm just reading the Bible, and this is what I see in the scriptures. And I could be wrong, but I don't think so. And I think it's interconnected with the coming of the first and second coming of Messiah. And I pointed him to Zechariah chapter 9. And I said, I think that it's not just a miscellaneous happenstance that we find that Oracle of Damascus connected with Messiah's first and second coming. I clearly believe that all Gospels speak of this, of the Messiah on a donkey. Behold, your King is coming to you, and meek and lowly and riding on a donkey. And all the Gospels record this. He was kind of befuddled by it all. But anyway, getting back to this woman, she calls me back after about 3 years of the Damascus onslaught and carnage and conflagration. And she says, how did you know this? And I said, I told you to get out of Damascus when you had a chance. She said, I live in one of the suburbs, and it's just devastated. It is a heap of ruins. And she said, I don't live there anymore because of that. And I said, you had a chance to get out when the going was good, and you didn't.
You can easily find and I've played it many times in my updates and talks, the drone footage of the suburbs of Damascus is just, and you look at cities like Aleppo and that type of thing. And I always get a lot of hate mail when I say this is the same methodology, the same destroy the city so people get up and move someplace else.
Yes.
That Russia did in Syria, that's now being deployed in Ukraine. And the hate mail that I get,
amazing,
that I don't understand, that it's all the Ukrainians doing it to themselves to get sympathy, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But people can believe whatever they want, I guess. But it is true that the destruction has been largely, it's almost exclusively Sunni neighborhoods and areas, and that's because Assad is associated with the Alawites, which are close to the Shiites, and Iran is Shiite, and Russia has gone in to prop up the Iranian Shiite
Hezbollah.
Hezbollah and the Axis, and there is a Sunni Hamas. Interesting, this is a current event thing, and a Hamas delegation was in Russia today to meet with Vladimir Putin.
Oh yeah,
so he's indirectly supporting them. And then there was a terrorist attack, and last I heard there were at least three people killed in the Israeli city of Elad, which is east of Tel Aviv. And it was I think they used an axe and a knife. And of course, Hamas has issued a statement praising this as a heroic operation. And in Gaza, they're having celebrations in the streets.
Wow.
Coinciding with the visit of this terrorist organization to see Vladimir Putin today to get his blessing.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of, and it's interesting they did that because last week they kind of got dissed by Erdogan in Turkey, who was going to Saudi Arabia. So he sort of backed off from Hamas and kicked some of them out of the country. And very interesting dynamics, which I all think fit into this whole prophetic
when you read Zechariah 9, it's incredible because it not only talks about Damascus, it talks about, Hamath, which is, the far north, which borders on it, and against Tyre and Sidon, this oracle. So you're dealing with Lebanon, though they are very wise for Tyre and so forth. It goes on about Tyre. And then it talks about Gaza, Ashkelon, Gaza, and Ekron. I mean, they're all involved in this conflict in Ashkelon, and it talks about Ashdod. All of those proximities. On the south coast of Israel, and with the Gaza Strip and everything, and then it leads right into from there about the judgment and so forth. Compared that with Isaiah 17. And then it says, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion, verse 9. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He's just and having salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will cut off the chariots from Ephraim. There's probably a profound meaning in that. And the horse from Jerusalem, both Judah and Ephraim are seizing something here. He shall speak peace to the nations. His dominion shall be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. Speaking, I believe, of the second coming of Christ and of the bringing together, of Ephraim and Judah, not relying upon the flesh, but upon the king who is coming to them. And so I see this as very much connected to the oracle of Damascus, and we're witnessing those alignment of nations and where the conflict is taking place today. I wish more would talk about the oracle of Damascus. I think it's exceedingly prophetically significant in the times in which we live. And no, it is not the Magog war and so forth. So anyway, that's
Doug,
my
I think
immediate take.
Doug Krieger, I think this is the problem that we wrestle with and the questions that we get. For example, somebody posted this week on my YouTube video, because I talk about the four horsemen, and their shadows, are sort of casting back into our time at least, or they're mounting up or that type of thing. But then somebody will say, well, why don't we just, stop with all this nonsense and say that the four horsemen have been unleashed and they're running around doing all kinds of things. And I'm not, but this is something I know you and I have talked about this, Doug Krieger and Doug Hamp, that at some point we got to have, I think we almost need like a committee because the problem is everybody's out there, and I'm sure you're you guys are like me. I get these timelines and stuff from people all the time, and they've got it all figured out, or they send me to multiple videos, and none of them are the same, and so it's sort of like I don't think that the prophecy is going to be one individual. I think it's going to be the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, or 2 or 3,000. And I think we need to have some kind of method to say if this is that which was prophesied. And so that's why we talk about that's. I think tonight we're talking about the sequencing. So it's just a concern that I have as these things come about.
So okay, you heard enough from us. So how about you guys? What do you feel?
Well, so we're talking about the Damascus becoming a ruinous heap. So that seems to be step one. It's in some order, right? I think the 2 witnesses coming is huge. I think we have to see the 2 witnesses come on the scene, and they're going to make this place a living hell. People are going to hate them with a passion, and and then they will be destroyed by the Antichrist or the beast. And then it gets really nasty on planet Earth, right? Because people did not accept the love of truth that they were coming and telling people to repent and turn back to God. Because they did not accept that, then they're going to believe the strong delusion, which is what Satan's going to bring in. And I think the whole alien story is part of that scenario.
Yes. I agree with that 100%. Yeah. But
when you say alien, I think it's going to be, the lie is going to be they can be a god.
Sure.
I mean, I don't even like to use their term alien. I don't like to give it any credibility. Sort of like the little R word I refuse to say. So I don't use aliens, but it's going to be the oldest lie in the book. You can become as a god. We are the ones that created you. We can help you, and you can become immortal. I think that's what the ultimate future final mark is. It will literally make you immortal, because during that 5-month period, they're wanting to die and they can't die.
Yeah,
and there's a reason they can't die. And I would say that if the which I align with Krieger more than I do Doug Hamp on this.
And I appreciate that so deeply, brother.
on the two witnesses, I believe there could be there could be very well two literal type of prophets, okay, that embody all the power of these two witnesses. But I mean, this text tells us they're the two olive trees and the two menorahs, and the olive trees are the two houses. The two, it's Judah and Ephraim, Judah and Joseph, Judah and the house of Israel. Those are the two olive trees consistently. And so I think it's going to be sort of I think we're already seeing the two. I think you're seeing those of Judah that are now proclaiming, Yeshua is Messiah. And you're seeing those out of Ephraim that are now saying, some of these things we were taught were Jewish are not Jewish. They're just biblical. And no, I haven't converted to Judaism, and I don't follow the rabbis or anything like that. But I just think they're starting to testify. I think you're starting to see Deuteronomy 30 beginning to be fulfilled. So I think we're seeing,
Scott, in case you didn't know, it was interesting that in the Memorial Day remembrance ceremony in Jerusalem last night, the rabbi got up and read Psalm 83.
Oh my! Woo!
Yeah,
that's significant.
Yeah, I mean that's very interesting. Well, so Joel Blackford has a good question here. Prove to me that the horsemen aren't writing. So Scott's the lawyer. So
you can't prove. That's like Joel. When's the last time you beat your wife? I mean,
or prove that the moon isn't cheese. I mean,
prove to me that John Haller is not the most reasonable person you ever met. Yeah.
He would have, before he came to the courtroom, he'd have to work on his cross-examination skills.
It's hard to prove a negative, I guess, is the point. But I mean, look, certainly, I think people can make the case that these horsemen, their shadows are being of what they're going to accomplish, are casting, bits and pieces of things back into our time, or they're, as others say, they're mounting up and getting ready to go, but others will say, well, they've been riding around since World War I.
And I would say it's been cycles, but there will be a final cycle. In other words, and I don't think it's coincidence that it's been about 2 days since Yeshua, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, returned to his place.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing this organic move. It's not being led by any one person, but it's happening everywhere. People, they're not denying Christ. They're just leaving some of their churches. They're carrying over the blood of the Lamb. Now you got a few that just jumped the ditch and hit Judaism hard. And there's another ditch on the other side of this narrow path. But I just think that's the most prophetic sign that we are getting very, very close to the end. And Mr. Krieger's worked out all his math problems, and I think they're spot on. The one thing that we differ on is he really, really, really likes those secular dates that secular history.
I love those secular dates.
But I think those dates could be 2 or 3 years back in time or forward in time, which your math would still be perfect. Just your starting point would be different. And I don't think there's any. What we saw with Charlie Vector 19er and the state-approved treatment, I believe that was the first seal. I believe that was a pestilence. That's those 4 horsemen or the 4 altar judgments, and one is pestilence, one is generally war, famine, and then you've got the wild beasts of the earth, and you see that in the 4th seal. It encompasses the first 3. So it's not like the first seal is going to come out and be over with, and then now we're going to have war. Okay, war's going to stop, and now we're going to have famine.
Yeah, now it's time.
And then we're just going to have a bunch of death.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's going to be it's going to be like this,
and they're going to overlap, and they're all going to increase over time, and they're going to reach an apex, which is at the return of Christ. So I think that they're, I think you can make the case. Okay, I'm not willing to go out on a limb and say, "Yep, they're happening. The horsemen are riding," and but certainly, I mean, even today we're living at a very unique time. Again, when I talk about the convergence of the acceleration and convergence of everything, I mean, there was a major drop in the stock market today, and there's an economic and there's a food crisis coming. I just don't think there's any way around it at this point. There's just too many things happening that are going to make this be a big problem.
I want to give credit to the late Reynold Showers, of whom I had the privilege of writing a rebuttal to his pre-trib rapture in this text, the testimony of Jesus. Okay, why the rapture of the church matters, even though I'm using the R word. Forgive me, Scott. But I want to say this. He brought out something very, I think, significant when he said that the book that the Lamb is opening and worthy to open the seals thereof, of the 4 horsemen of the so-called apocalypse, and then the 5th seal of the martyrs, the 6th with astronomical significance, and eventually the 7th, which, eventually opens up the trumpets and the vials and so forth. The thing that he brings out is that the earth is the Lord's. It is his inheritance. He owns it. And this goes back to Jeremiah, the writing of the contract and putting it in a vase. And then when everybody, is gone, like who really owns the property? And then it's opened. And then you can see in the vase that it is owned by the rightful owner, whose inheritance it belongs to him. And consequently, any squatters, any of those who are interlopers are cast off the property because the rightful owner has been discovered because of the opening of the book and the seals. And so what we're hearing is that all these seals are popping off the book, and it's opening. The 7 seals are opening, and eventually, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. He owns it, and all the interlopers are cast out. I think he did a fabulous job on that portion as to what is this book all about and why are these seals popping off. And so if you want to know, I think it was you, John, that said, you don't want to know when the second coming of Christ happens, when the last martyr is martyred. You got to wait until vengeance is mine, I will repay. So the last martyr comes in, and then that's it. Am I right on that, John? I don't know if.
That was sort of a discussion on the fullness. What's the fullness of the Gentiles? Because my pre-trib friends all say, well, that's when the last person gets saved. That's the fullness of the Gentiles, is the last person being saved. And I'm sort of like, well, okay, does the Bible anywhere talk about an incomplete number? And it does in Revelation chapter 6, where the the fifth seal, they're saying, what, Lord, when are you? It's kind of interesting. They're in heaven and they're asking for vengeance. That's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, I thought you overcame that problem.
Their conscious thought there is like, Lord, when are you going to go, take vengeance
when are you
out
going to take some
on what they
vengeance
did to
on
us?
Yeah,
and the answer there is wait a little while until what? Until your number is complete. And so I was only asking the question, is that the complete number that is the fullness of the Gentiles? It's
very good.
Full number of martyrs in the church.
And I would say that, if we go back to where Paul is quoting the fullness of the nations, it's the blessing over Ephraim, who was scattered to the four corners of the earth, not just Africa, not just Asia, not just Europe, not just America, but all four.
Right.
And so when you have that Ephraim who became the fullness of the nations, and of course, when those that are in the nations call upon the name of the Lord, and those of Judah who've been broken off because they have denied Yeshua, accept Yeshua as Messiah, they're grafted back in. And then you have a complete olive tree.
Yes.
And you can't, the olive trees, he's using a cultivated tree and he's using a wild olive tree. And again, that's why I say the two witnesses, it's the two ecclesias, the two houses that are in his wisdom. And next time I create a planet, maybe my policy of getting the gospel out may be different, but this is what he chose to do. He chose to, and it's his pattern you see all the way back in Genesis 1. He chose to divide so he could bring back together into one. And that's the policy that's sort of, you see it in Genesis 1 all the way through Revelation.
It's the reconciliation.
This reunification process.
So in Mormon theology, do you kind of get a chance to set all the rules, for your own planet when you get it? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just asking.
Didn't we talk about this about a week ago? If we're like Mormons, I was mentioning that my son, my 16-year-old, he's got some really tough questions. So if God's got this 7,000-year plan, everything's going to get good here, Dad, and you're right about this in the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years because I'm wiggling with my kids. He goes, "Why didn't you just do it now?" I said, "Next time you are God, son, you can decide to do whatever you want to do."
I saw a question there, and somebody said about, because I mentioned Psalm 83, and they said, is that really a prophecy? And so that's an area of controversy. And I'm just telling you, it is one of the things I think sort of begs for more study. It certainly is a indication of a everlasting animosity between certain people groups and Israel. And I'm just saying too, is when you layer on top of that these Abraham Accords, where you see parts of these people from these people groups coming into these agreements with Israel, and the one that's hanging out there right now that's not been done is Saudi Arabia. But and I think that Saudi Arabia will change when the current king dies. It's, in that tribal culture, the crown prince will not go against his father, but he has indicated some sympathy towards the nation of Israel. And he wants to enter into an agreement with them. There's been some discussions back and forth. Then you layer on top of that, and that's why I think sometimes this thing is much later than we think, because you look at what's going on with regard to the Temple Mount, and there's a tremendous dispute right now about the Temple Mount. It's under the control of Jordan and the king of Jordan. When he talks about it, he always says the Jewish and Christian, or not, the Muslim and Christian holy sites, and he never misses an opportunity to leave out Israel or Jewish holy site. There's some thinking in Israel that they would like to get, and I think the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia would like to get control of that back. But understand too that there was a recent paper talk, whatever, put out by a Saudi Islamic scholar who said that Really, that's not the third holiest site in Islam. And Mordecai Kadar, he did a paper on this back about 2007 or 2008. He's a Jewish Islamic scholar, Mordecai Kadar. And he said the farthest mosque was in Saudi Arabia, not too far from Mecca. And this myth that only came up because the Jews had started to come back to Israel and were starting to talk about rebuilding their temple. And the things about the temple are ramping up as well. So I don't, I'm more and more of the mind that some of the things that we want to dismiss a lot of stuff and say, well, it's not prophetic, it's not prophecy. But then it's one of those things where this is the example that I always used on Krieger is that there was a prophecy about a virgin shall conceive and bear a son. And so if you layer that on top of the Daniel timeline, that in, the late, before the calendar changeover was, put on things looking backwards, were the Jewish rabbis running around looking for people from the tribe of Judah, descendants of David, young virgins who had conceived. I mean, was that a prophecy that was on everybody's mind that this is one of the things we look for? And I don't know that it was. I don't know that anybody's found any proof of that. But then when Matthew writes, it says this was that which was spoken of by the prophet. So I'm just saying so that's why I don't dismiss Psalm 83 as having prophetic. It certainly sets up a condition.
Yes.
So,
man. Well, Doug, let's hear something from you, brother. I know you're the grand host of this affair.
I'm happy to let you guys talk. This is interesting.
You've been so burned by that sun.
Two-faced Doug Hamp here.
Yeah, two-faced. You pick one. But so we led off with the question, can we know the sequence of the Lord's return, right? So we've suggested, Doug Krieger, you suggested that the Oracle of Damascus is a major part of that. I mentioned the two prophets, right? I think that's a huge part.
Two witnesses, yeah.
The two witnesses. So I guess, it still begs the question, can we know? I mean, is this a yes or no question? Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts. We've touched on some of those. What are some other things that in this sequence, and I guess, are we looking at kind of the whole, 70th week? Or are we looking at more of the, it's over and then here comes Jesus, right?
I've got a very interesting twist on this. Some of you know I serve on the board of directors of Word to Russia. And of course, I live in Sacramento, and we're anticipating upwards of way over 100,000 refugees coming into Sacramento because of the large Russian Ukrainian speaking community here. And in fact, I told the mayor that listen, we might get upwards of 200,000, even 300,000 if this war keeps going. Then I got a call.
Doug, are they coming from Ukraine or Russia or what?
Coming directly from both. That's a good question.
And now, are they coming from the Russian-speaking part of Ukraine or all of Ukraine, or?
Well, here's what's fascinating. They're coming from Poland primarily. There are flights now coming directly from Warsaw, primarily Warsaw. A lot of them have gotten into Berlin somehow as well. And so they're coming from both those places. And a few are coming from Romania, whatever. But the great secret is the number of Russians from Russia. I'm not talking about Ukrainian, the Donbass and all that region of East Ukraine. A lot of those Russians that have been there fled into Russia, actually, because of the bombardments taking on both sides and artillery and the heavy guns and so forth. And so you've got nearly 200,000 that have gone from eastern Ukraine into Russia itself. But from Russia into the Baltics and elsewhere are getting out of Russia and are fleeing Russia itself because of the and most of those that are coming are more, if you would, enlightened, liberal types, ages, primarily young people in their 30s. that were raised under a post-Soviet era and have enjoyed their freedoms and the capitalism of the West and their Kentucky Fried Chicken and their cars and everything else. And they've just decided with their feet, we're not going to stay here any longer. This is going to get worse. And so probably upwards of 300,000 of them have fled all over the place, to Georgia, to Romania, to Slovakia, Poland. I mean, the Baltics, Sweden, anywhere they can go. They have Finland even. They have decided that they want to get out of this thing before it blows up, and all the worse. Now, so I had a call from I'll just call him Sergey, and he called me from Moscow, and we communicated, and he wanted to know what the prophetical sequence was. In other words, he asked a very pertinent question. Where do you think that the war in Ukraine and now Russia, do you think it's going to spread? What are the consequences of this? And here's what I told him. I said, what you're looking at and what you're witnessing, the trajectory of this war is consolidating if you would, the king of the West, the merchants of Tarshish, the Western trading empires that are out there. The West is consolidating as a result of the war in Ukraine. You're getting the West coming together. I mean, even neutral Austria. You're getting, Sweden and Finland joining NATO here in a couple of weeks. You're getting all of this happening, and you're getting the West with its armaments, consolidating its armaments, with the United States, barely leading the whole charge, but nevertheless, with its clout and everything. And so, yeah, this is happening. Now, why is it happening? And the only thing I can say is this. When you look at Ezekiel 38 and you look at Daniel 11, 40 through 45, that's where on my map I have what is known as the so-called, for lack of a better expression, the Gog Magog conflagration. And the king of the north, I have said this for many years, is comprised of primarily ancient tribal nations and peoples of Turkey and Iran and Kush, ancient Kush being the upper part of the Levant, which is Iraq primarily, but in that vicinity, and then which is also known as Ethiopia, and then you have the king of the south, which is the northern tier of African states, including all Muslim, including Egypt, okay, which is mentioned both in Ezekiel 38 and also in Daniel 11. And it's against the willful king that they come up against. So I'm talking to this Russian, and I'm talking to him in terms of, where does Russia come into all this, and where does China come into all of this? And I said, well, according to as far as I can see, and this is just my interpretation. Am I going to die on this hill? No, I'm not. Okay, but I think it's geopolitically, it is extremely solid, and that's why I got a call from the DOD, and that was that Israel is going to be allied with the nations of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. That's happening with the so-called Abraham Accords, right? Abrahamic Accords. And that means Sheba and Dedan are allied with Israel and the ships of Tarshish, the merchants of Tarshish, which is the West, if you would, the king of the West. So the king of the north and the king of the south will come up against the willful king. I believe the antecedent is there substantially. And then after that war is over, which I believe is at the commencement of the 70th week of Daniel, the final week, which we are approaching. We're not there yet, but we're very close. And that's what we're witnessing, is the consolidation of the Western powers. They are consolidating in a very strong way. And President Biden is, touting the fact that, wow, Russia never saw that coming, that we would all unite together against, the bear. Okay, so now we have this incredible geopolitical phenomenon taking place where the West is consolidating in a very, very strong way. That you've got the Democrats and the Republicans, crying out for war. Aside from Tucker Carlson, it's almost across the board. More weapons of warfare, right? And so this is the cry going up. Now, when that happens, it sets up for the Gog-Magog war, I believe. And what you're going to see is you're going to see the West united together with Saudi Arabia and those trading, all those nations of the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, whether it's Qatar, United Arab Emirates, even Yemen, the whole thing. And they are going to be allied with Israel in this conflict, and they are going to be defeated, the king of the north and the king of the south. Now, it is after that war. That's a prophetic war that is coming. And of course, you know that Gog shows up at the end of the book of Revelation too. That's a whole different subject. But in this war, it is setting up, I hate to say the word, perfectly right now. And if you look at that war and the parties that are the earthly aspects of the spiritual powers, are Gog, Magog, the allies of Gog, and you've got these spiritual powers, but you also have the peoples that are in on the earth, Gomar, Togomar, Meshech, Tubal, all those ancient tribal designations are almost all exclusively in Turkey, and of course Persia is in Elam, are there. Okay, they are there for the conflict, and they unite together, even though one is Shiite and the other is Sunni. They unite together against Israel, and this is going to get really intense. And but it's going to be very quick. I look at this thing as I'm with Arnold Fruchtenbaum on this. It's at the commencement of the 70th week. It's going to go for 40 days, and it's over. Okay, and then you're going to see.
It's interesting, Doug, if I could interject here. So sure. As I'm preparing for my update that I'll do on Sunday, I've been translating through Al Akbar newspaper out of Lebanon, which is a Hezbollah mouthpiece.
Yes.
And on the front page of tomorrow's paper, the Friday paper's out already. It is a picture. The headline is Russia - Israel in the end in the gray zone. And then when you go into there's 4 pages, there's actually 6 pages inside that cover sort of the conflict right now. And one of those, top of page 10, is Israel is with the West in the face of Russia-Ukraine war.
Yes. And that I mean, you can't get any clearer than that.
That's coming from the Hezbollah faction. So
and they're clear.
Iranian. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say they're very clear about what's going on.
And I don't want to I'm not engaging in newspaper exegesis. I'm just telling you what the newspaper says.
Right. Agreed. But anyway, let me just finish this scenario. It's called the prophetic scenario. Okay. And what it is this: after this Gog-Magog war, it says this in Daniel, and also if you read into Ezekiel 39, that it describes another war, which is described in the Revelation about these birds and the great conflagration at the end. Dwight Pentecost from Dallas Seminary brought this out, and he calls it the Armageddon campaign. I mean, war breaks out, and it says this, that the willful king will hear of rumors from the east first and the north. What north? I thought we just got rid of the king of the north. Well, rumors from the north. Now, I know a lot of this is set in the context of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who tried to Hellenize the Jews back in 168 or so BC. But as a prototype, it's a perfect prototype. And whatever happened to him, he came to his end, and no one was able to help him. I realize that. But I will not go on with Dr. Woolvard from Dallas Seminary, who says, hey, you know what? This war's already over. What war? The abomination of desolation is over. No, it's not. Jesus spoke of a future abomination of desolation. I mean, how could it be over, right? Well, then it was over in 70 AD. Well, now it's going to be over at the end of the age. Strike 3 and you're out. In fact, all of the above are correct. So if you want to couch it in terms of Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanius, if you want to couch it in terms of Titus, who destroyed the second temple, Herodian temple, you want to couch it in terms of the final Antichrist? Absolutely. All are the abomination of desolation, different aspects of the same abomination of desolation. But the final conflict is the Armageddon campaign, which winds up in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, as Doug Hamp has so adroitly put out there. And I'm in total agreement with that. And that war is going to be eventually what's left of all these powers that will come up against Jerusalem on that day. And but I think that now there is a question. Why does the Antichrist, or the willful king, why does he make his pavilion, his headquarters, in the beautiful land? And at the timing that he does that, it seems like it's into the beginning of the 70th week of Daniel, the final 7-year time frame. Could it be that Babylon, that great city, is somehow, annihilated? It goes up in smoke? Does that happen during the 70th week? Does it happen at the final judgment when, in Revelation 16, where the city breaks up into 3 parts, in which I think is indicative of the fact that there is a religious apostasy aspect of Babylon the Great. There is a commercial aspect in chapter 18, and there is a administrative or governmental aspect of the judgment of the beast and the false prophet and everything in chapter 19 of Revelation. The 3 aspects. That's a good dispensational teaching. And by the way, so anyway, so that is and we can learn from the dispensationalists to some extent. And we're all together in the same family of God, and we're told that knowledge of the prophetic in Daniel chapter 12 verse 4 will increase and become great at the end of days. And I think that's what's happening. But I don't think we don't need to hold second fiddle to anybody geopolitically when it comes to these final conflicts, which are prophesied in Scripture. The Bible is not silent on this issue. And our analysis is just as wise and as prudent and as spot on as any of these eggheads that are in Washington, D.C. Forgive me. So, anyway, I'm making myself perfectly clear.
Okay, so maybe we need to run this by our new disinformation czar arena that we have.
Right.
Scary Poppins, as she's being called, the propaganda Nandy.
There's an 83-year-old retired California math geek out here causing problems.
Yeah, he's definitely dangerous.
Yeah, if you don't watch it, he'll write 10 books in the next 10 months.
He's got it down. He's got all the hey, I'm telling you right now, man, all these nations are just lining up perfectly. I keep shaking my head. Hey, and these Abraham Accords were just amazing. I mean, if that didn't seal the whole thing. Now, we got some flukes, like Morocco, but hey, they don't know if they're on foot or horseback half the time in any event. They could go either way, right? But Egypt is pivotal. You're going to find out that the Muslim Brotherhood is very strong in Egypt to this day. Very strong. And that thing could turn on a dime. And Egypt is...
It did turn... Well, Doug, it did turn on a dime back in 2011, 2012, where they sort of picked up the model of Erdogan, who's a Muslim Brotherhood guy in Turkey, and they tried to compress in a very, in 6 months to a year what it took Erdogan a decade to do in Turkey to get rid of the remnants of Ataturk. And now, I mean, Damascus is completely off. And he was in Saudi Arabia. I have a video of him going to the Kaaba in Mecca, in Mecca just last week.
Erdogan,
when he was in Saudi Arabia. And
by the way, let me insert real quick here, brother. Erdogan's people hacked my website. How do I know this? Because I turned it on and it said you've been hacked by the Lion of Islam. Got a hold of the FBI, and the FBI said, "You know who these people are?" I said,
Oh,
I have
really?
no idea. And they said they hack Austria, Switzerland, Germany. They've hacked France. There's 50 of them, and they operate throughout the world. And it's because of Erdogan. They are all his buds, right?
Interesting. He's sort of, and he's in political trouble right now, but understand too that this revolution, the Muslim Brotherhood revolution in Egypt back in 2012, 2013,
Right.
that followed a severe drought in Russia and Ukraine wheat growing regions in 2010, layered on top of a several year very severe drought in the wheat growing regions of Syria, which led to that started the Syrian civil war. Then you had the civil war in Egypt, and there are guys, geopolitical analysts like Peter Zahn and others, who are saying, listen, what's going on in Russia right now, Russia, Ukraine, with the wheat, which from Ukraine, over 50% of the wheat of like Syria, Egypt, other countries in the Middle East come from there, and they're not going to plant this year. It's just they're in planting season. It's just not. It just doesn't look like it's going to happen. So, 10 years ago, we had revolutions in the Arab Spring. I think we're going to see something worse this year in the very near future in those same countries.
Yes, I think you're right, John. And another thing too is, isn't Erdogan? He is immersed into Libya. Okay.
Yes.
He is utterly immersed. So he is got this caliphate concept in his cranium, and
Neo-Ottoman Empire. I mean, he's pushing into right as we speak. I mean, he's talking about sending these a million Syrian refugees back to Syria, to Idlib, which is an area that he effectively controls through his proxies, and then also into the Kurdish regions of and he's long had this dream of a revived Neo-Ottoman thing, and he's very involved in a lot of the unrest that's going on in Israel. He is funding groups in East Jerusalem to cause problems. So there's about 18 layers of things that are going on right at this moment.
Wow.
I should leak my draft of my prophecy update for Sunday and maybe get some press.
But anyway, it winds up that rumors from the east and the north, I think that's when you're going to see China, and you're going to see Russia, and you're going to see the West. And that basically, ostensibly, that is World War III. That is World War III. And I think Israel will be very weakened by the Gog-Magog conflagration, but she will be very dependent at that time upon the king of the West. And that's why his pavilion is there. In other words, I'm going to protect you. You're under my tabernacle, my pavilion, my tent. That's what that symbolizes, I believe. And I'm going to protect you. And so no big deal. Hang in there. And then he'll just turn on him. That's what's going to happen. And but God has got a plan too.
So we've confused one person, it looks like.
Yes.
We spun out.
Welcome to the club. It's very complicated. There's so many things happening at the same time.
Okay.
But then somebody also said, Brian says that Gog Magog seems to be after the millennium. And there is a Gog Magog after the millennium.
There is, right.
But I think there are two of them. There's the first one, and there's a lot of differences with the second one. I think Ezekiel 38, 39 is mainly our near horizon time.
Our immediate, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, of course I wrote a whole book on this, right? Cryptic Image 3. I really believe that I'll give my 2 cents now. Okay, so
yeah, it's okay. We can only throw stones at you, brother. No big
there you go. That's fine. That's wonderful. And watch out and burn. So be nice to me.
Right? Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But no, I really think that the Gog Magog war is exactly the same event as the Armageddon thing. I mean, if you start lining up Gog, which I show in the book, that Gog is an ancient Sumerian word meaning death or enmity, which is just Satan once again, right? And you have all these nations coming against Israel. You're going to have birds are going to have a big feast at the end. You're going to have a massive earthquake. You got hail coming down. I mean, it's just, I think it's really hard to say that these are two different events, right? They're the same event. And as far as Gog and Magog after the millennium, well, once you understand that Gog means death or enmity, and it's just Satan, he's up to his old tricks, okay? Right. So the one after the millennium is a different event, but it's the same players, okay? That's the basic idea. So that makes sense. Yes. So, the way I'm seeing this is, I think it's very interesting, all that you guys are saying. So I just love to let you just talk about all these things that are happening nowadays, right? It's really interesting. But I think, we're going to have, like, all of this stuff is leading up to the time when Jesus decides to open up those seals. And when he does that, then, and only then, is when the two witnesses are going to show up. And then they're going to start calling humanity to come back to the Father. And most of the world will say, we're not interested. And so their message is going to be spurned. And then they will look for a hero to get rid of these two guys, because nobody on planet Earth will be able to stand up to them. Right? It says if anyone tries to stop them, then fire will come out of their mouth and will just destroy them. Right. And they're going to bring all these other plagues, just like Moses and Elijah were doing. They're going to bring those type of plagues upon the planet, and the world is going to loathe these two individuals. And this is when the beast that is not, and ascends out of the abyss will ascend out of the abyss, and he will then kill them, and their bodies will lay dead in the streets of Jerusalem for 3.5 years. Doug Krieger, I think we may disagree on that, but it's okay. It's all right.
3.5 years is called open persecution.
Well, sure. Yeah, but nevertheless, and so then they're going to resurrect. They will then go up into the sky, into heaven.
Very loud noise.
And and then the world is going to seriously freak out at that point. And then everybody's going to start thinking, we need to get prepared, because they went to get reinforcements. They went to get their king or whoever they serve, and they're going to come back. And it says in the text that the whole world is ready to make war against Yeshua, right? So that's what they're preparing for. And then I think that because the two witnesses were so formidable, that the only way to overcome them, this would be the basic scenario, is that, hey, we all have to become gods. We all have to take the upgrade and become these advanced beings, so that we can fight against our creator, who we don't like. And if you're not willing to do that, well, then you are definitely a existential threat to planet Earth. We need to get rid of you. And of course, then we're going to have massive killings, right? And so this whole thing is going to go on until the leadership of Jerusalem, who have at this point, up until this point, have made a covenant with death and Sheol in Isaiah 28. They're going to start thinking, maybe we made the wrong decision. And they're going to be wondering, how do we get out of this? Because we're going to die. Our whole country is going to die. And that is when it's going to be just a flash in their minds. Wait a second. The Messiah that should be coming right now, he already came. And he told our body, called the Sanhedrin, he called this body that we are serving. He said to them that you will not see my face from now until you say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed who comes in the name of the Lord. Right. And they're going to recognize that, and they're going to then just acknowledge this, and they're going to weep about it, according to Zechariah chapter 12. They're going to weep. I think they'll probably weep for a couple of days, and then it'll hit them like, wait a second, he's coming. We don't need to weep. He said he'll come and he'll save us. And that is when they're going to make their way down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, because they'll be expecting him to come on top of the Mount of Olives. Now, at this point, this is when the Antichrist and the beast and his dudes, or Gog, whoever you want to call them, they start trying to do a pincer move, so that they're going to try to attack them from the north and from the south. But that is when Yeshua shows up. His feet touch the Mount of Olives. It splits in two. They flee through this mountain valley, brand new. And this is why I think it's called Armageddon. It's the valley of the judgment of the sheaves. It's a brand new, not yet existing valley that will be created, and they will flee through there. And that is where the battle of Armageddon or Armageddon will be fought, is in that valley that does not yet exist. And that's when Jesus is going to trample on his enemies.
Right.
So that's the sequence that I see. And I
you mean when the Mount of Olives splits?
Basically.
Is that the one you're talking about? Doug Hamp.
What was the question, John? I'm sorry.
Yeah, he fast forwarded to the very end.
Is that valley created when the Mount of Olives splits?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, so that leads to another sequence thing. Is this because Jesus has set his foot on the Mount of Olives and it splits in two?
Yes.
Okay, so is the sequence, but then it talks about him coming from Edom with his
from Teman,
robes dipped in blood, Isaiah chapter 61.
Yes.
Although it says he comes out of heaven riding on his horse with his robes dipped in blood too.
Well, in Isaiah 34, it talks about how he's going to make war against the powers of heaven, right? Which I talk about this in the book, that you're going to have these chimeric creatures who are coming out of the abyss in Revelation chapter 9. They're going to be these really scary things, chimeras or manticores or the god Nergal. They're the centaur with wings. And
Elon Musk. With the cyborgs of the future.
I didn't say
Elyon.
There's 200 million of these things, right? So they're going to be fleshly.
I'm making it up.
They're fleshly, and so he is going to have a battle against these beings in the heavenly sphere, and it says that their blood will drip down to the earth, right? And this is going to happen in the heavenly space. So that's where I think that part of that fulfillment of Isaiah 63 could be. I think it also is him trampling his enemies, but I think that is part of it. Okay, so. All this goes together.
Do you have that happening on Day of Atonement? Do you have him setting foot on the Mount of Olives on Yom Kippurim?
I don't get technical with that, because my thing is, I think that he comes on the Feast of Trumpets, and then there's going to be this huge battle. All right. And there's going to be a number of days. It doesn't just take place in 5 nanoseconds. This is going to take place in time, in real time. And I personally think that the Yom Kippur event is going to be the judgment, right? That's where he's going to sit down on his throne, and the nations
the Lamb
and
is worthy to judge. That's the Day of Atonement.
And in my opinion, all right, that's how I see it. Yeah,
10 days, 10 kings, that 10 things.
Oh, I think he got and again, I think the plan is, even after he returns, this is the way I see it on Yom Teruah, on Feast of Trumpets, is so that there's a 10-day period for those that have not placed their faith in him as Messiah, as Lord.
I like that.
To do so. And the text says they shall look to him or on him or upon him whom they pierced. Well, we look at Revelation and talk about the sign in the sky. In other words, it's not going to be, I'm not out in the desert, I'm not in the closet, I'm not in the secret spaces. When he returns and that veil gets pulled back, everybody's going to see it. And then our Jewish brethren that are still holdouts by that time, they've got 10 days prior to Yom Kippurim. Now they're going to remain mortal, just like the others of the nations that didn't take the mark of the beast that are going to go, oh my, hey, we want to be on that guy's team.
Yes,
we want to be on team Jesus.
I'm in total agreement with that. And the fact of the matter is this, that the Feast of Trumpets, the last trump, the whole thing about Yom Teruah, and then the 10 days unto Yom Kippur. That is a tremendous insight, Scott. A time of repentance, of introspection, of the Lamb is worthy to judge. Now I look at Daniel 12 as the 1290 days. You guys know how I feel about that. 30 days beyond. Now what I discovered, to my amazement, that 30 days from the 10th of Tishri, which is, Yom Kippur, to 10 Heshvan or Cheshvan is 30 days. Okay. In other words, you're dealing with 20 days in Tishri and 10 more days in Cheshvan. That date of 10/11 Cheshvan, the next month after Tishri on the Hebrew calendar, they have accorded the rabbinical authorities and the rabbis, and you probably know far more about this than I do, Doug, but they have accorded that month to Mashiach, to the Messiah. Nothing happens in that month aside from the 10th and 11th of Cheshvan is the commemoration of the death of Rachel, weeping for her children. She will weep no more because their captivity is over. So at the end of the 1,290 days and that 30-day time frame, 10 Tishri to 10 Heshvan is the judgment of the Lamb. He pours out the judgment. That's what I believe. You're going to see the pouring out of the vials and of the trumpets sounding the sevenfold trumpet, and the judgment has come. Okay, and then at that point, it says, "Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1335th day," which is 45 days beyond the at this point, beyond the 10th of Heshvan, which turns out to be
Hanukkah.
The Kislev 2425, which would be the Feast of Dedication, and that would fulfill Daniel 9:24 to anoint the most holy place and the commencement of the millennial reign of the King David upon the earth, the Son of the living God.
Yeah, I did a teaching on that out at you can probably find it out there. I think it's called A Future Hanukkah.
Right. That's a future Hanukkah. Yes. Yeah. You know, every time Hanukkah rolls along, I live next to a synagogue, and I always tell my Jewish friends walking up and down, I go, "Praise God for victory over the Antichrist." They look at me kind of puzzled. I said, "You remember Haman? Come on now." You know? And they finally catch it. You know, it's good. Anyway, it's all good. Praise God. But anyway, I want to say, Scott, I was impressed with your rendition of the two olive trees. You know, the two witnesses. And then I got to thinking about the two lampstands, the two menorah. Well, we know that the two lamps, you know, they're the two sons of oil that stand before the Lord of the whole earth. You know, Zerubbabel, the governor, and you know, Yeshua, the high priest. And you got these two representing the kingship and the priesthood, right? You got the two, okay? And, of course, in the middle is this beautiful bowl, and out from the bowl, you know, all the seven lamps are lit and so forth. But you've got these two lamps, if you would, and they're luchnia. They're in the Greek, right? Luchnia, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but there's seven of them that Jesus stands in the midst of at the beginning of the Revelation. Now, our beloved pre-trib friends state that you never see or hear of the church after Revelation 4. The doors open and that goes out. We're all out of here, right? In Revelation 4. But what's the luchnia showing up? And the only time they're used, these words have to do with the seven. It says the seven lampstands or luchnia are the seven ecclesia. Okay, and then they show up again in Revelation 11. They are there as representative. And so all I'm saying is, I love.
What if we looked at them like the seven assemblies, the way a first century Jew like Johanna and John would have looked at them? He wouldn't have known a church if it hit him upside the head. I mean,
that's right.
He was given a vision of what the church looked like shortly at the end, and he couldn't recognize it.
That's so.
Right. And I believe it's the seven assemblies, the seven ecclesias, the seven assemblies, which go back to the 7 days of creation and the seven feasts and the seven branch menorah and the seven spirits of God and
many different applications.
But to the point about it, he mentions the two ecclesias, kind of dovetailing what you're saying is there are only two of those assemblies that don't get judgment.
Now that's a great,
and they actually correlate to the unleavened bread, getting the leaven out of your house in Day of Atonement. You're atoned for. Right. So it's sort of like the second and the sixth, they link on that menorah.
Yeah.
If you will. The 1 and 7 link, 2 and 6 link, 3 and 5 link. That's why resurrection links. The resurrection links with power, which is the fifth, when we're going to be resurrected if we're dead. at his return on that
Yes.
fifth feast. So it's once you start to see it thematically, and you no longer, and you pointed out earlier about the abomination of desolation, that people would argue that it's, if you ask me, was the abomination of desolation, did it occur with Antiochus Epiphanes or with Titus or in 135 or again in 600 AD, or is it future? I'm going to say yes to all this.
Right.
There is an ongoing present day abomination of desolation sitting on the Temple Mount.
Amen. Amen.
But it's not the future ultimate final one yet, I don't think.
Well, here's another thing. See, I've looked at this abomination. I pass this by you guys again. Okay. The Antichrist, I don't think knows his identity up to a certain point. Okay. And then when Satan entered into Judas, according to the scripture, he committed the dastardly deed of betrayal and all of the stuff that went along with it. And he went out and hung himself because death and satanic destruction. He's the destroyer, the destructor. And so this is the abomination. Okay, so the interesting thing is that the Antichrist, here's what I feel, that his entitlement, as we call it, there are many Antichrists that entered into the world. So this great leader, personified as a great leader, is leading the charge of, I'm a good guy. I basically am wiping out all of these enemies of Israel. I'm basically the bud. Then the temple, he declares himself as God in the sanctuary. Yes, there are two different words for temple. One is the temple of a body. The other is the physical temple in Jerusalem. And I believe, based upon the calendric accounting, that if the 70th week begins on a Passover, in the middle of the week, after 1,260 days, it turns out to be at a Feast of Tabernacles. All the nations are there. It is actually a Feast of Tabernacles on the 15th of Tishri, it turns out, chronologically speaking. And as a result, that is when you're going to perhaps, and I know a lot of feeling on this, that, this guy, there's an assassination attempt, he's wounded and he comes back to life as the beast. His entitlement as the beast of the Revelation is not until the midpoint at the abomination of desolation.
Amen.
Abomination is the incarnation of Satan into the body of the Antichrist.
Yes.
Which he is
brilliant.
entitled the son of perdition.
Yes.
He's gonna
preach it, Doug. Preach it. This is great.
He's going to mimic.
Golly, we nailed that bagger. And
he's going to mimic what Yeshua did. He's going to mimic on a future Passover season, I believe.
Yes.
Everything's going to go down on a moed, on a feast day. All the major events are going to happen.
Absolutely. Because Satan would love to counterfeit every one of them.
Yes.
And I think that in his declaration, I am God in the temple of God, 2 Thessalonians 2, I am God. He's the man of sin. He's the son of perdition. He's that wicked one. He's that willful king as well. He is that Antichrist as well. But the son of perdition is what happened to Judas in John 17, except the son of perdition, of destruction. And that's when Satan entered into Judas, and Satan is going to enter into the body of the Antichrist. That's it.
I don't know that it's going to be Satan, though. It's going to be that beast thing that's currently under lock and key. Satan's sitting here washing his hands, going, "No, buddy, you go do your thing. I'm just going to get in my prison for 1,000 years. I'm going to be locked up where you've been." So I don't believe it's Satan that inhabits the Antichrist. Yeah, it's the beast that rises from the abyss. He's under lock and key.
Well,
no,
all I can tell you is that
right now,
yes, absolutely.
The beast is under lock and key right now.
Oh, well, okay, but he's well.
It's not Satan.
All right.
Now, he may be a Satan.
I think they're going to merge. I'd say they're going to merge. That's what Doug is preaching.
Why
Doug,
is
you're
Satan,
absolutely right.
I love it. Emerging. I got
why is Satan not cast in the lake of fire if he's the first beast then? Because first beast is cast
in the lake of fire.
Yeah.
Well, that's the Antichrist. Because look at Judas. Judas hung himself on a tree. Is that Satan? No, but he entered into him, did his work, and got out. Right? Do I hear an amen? Oh,
Amen. Amen.
We,
Doug.
we need to
That
do a
was-
little dispensational rehab on Scott there. Get him to the Prophecy Watchers conference. Maybe Doug, you can get him a
Yeah.
set of DVDs.
Come on out.
or
We
something.
can make havoc together.
I went to
Yeah.
it a few years back. I had a
I know
wonderful
Scott would be
time.
there at
I
our-
went-
Come
I had
on, guys. We can all hang out. It'll be a lot of
hey,
fun.
we can hang out too.
I had
Yeah,
a great
rooms
time
or
of
something,
fellowship
you know?
with those
Hey, let's
guys.
have Doug Woodward organize something.
I think he's speaking at it, by the way.
Not is he
No,
really?
he's not.
Yes, he is. He's on the
Well,
list.
He's not on. Well, okay. Maybe I got.
I
the
thought
wrong
he was.
list.
I thought he was on the list that I saw.
I'm gonna
I'm looking at the list and he's not on it.
I'm gonna email the organizers and let him know that he talks to Doug Hamp and therefore should never ever talk at a pre-trib rapture conference, because that's what it is. It's not a prophecy conference anymore. It's a pre-trib rapture party, and sit around and talk about the pre-trib rapture. That's all they talk about.
Well, we have had a good time on this topic. So
And we didn't
Can
cover
we-
much of what we wanted to.
well, we tried.
What's
We
new?
tried. I'm always trying to keep us honest on this show, right?
Yeah, keep us honest.
But yeah. Well, so I think the sequence of the return of Jesus is absolutely knowable. Obviously, we have some different perspectives on exactly how that's going to happen, and who's Gog, who's the beast, what that's all about. But that's the fun of what we do. Okay, and if you guys are interested in learning more about my perspective, I just finished the audiobook for Corrupting the Image Volume 3. So
Ooh.
let me read it to you. Okay.
Yes.
So you can get that on my store, douglashamp.com /store, or you can get it on Audible if you want to get it from there. So it's up to you. But I think you'll really love it. I really do. And let me know. Write to me and tell me what you think about it. That'd be totally fun. So thank you, everybody. We love it that you guys are tuning in. We love all of your banter on the chat. We do our best to get to your questions. Sometimes we can't always get there. It doesn't always work in, but we will keep doing that. So we hope you will join us next week. Same time, same channel. Take care. God bless you. Have a great